Everyone believed the reclusive tech magnate's son had been born completely unable to hear. For 12 years, no one questioned it. Not the specialists, not the night nurses, not even his father. The boy lived in a cliffside observatory turned home, wrapped in a silence other people had decided for him. But everything changed the day a cook named Amara took a job on the headland and started listening with more than her ears. The house that watched the sea. Elias Kareem built a fortune from satellites and data. Then the plane carrying his wife went down over the Atlantic the week their son was born. He bought an old observatory on a wind-carved point and turned it into a home. Circular rooms, white corridors, glass that swallowed the sky. It looked like a crown laid on the ocean. It felt like a ward. His son, Armin, grew up there, barefoot and thin, with sea salt in his hair and quiet pressed into his bones. Doctors said he had profound bilateral sensorineural hearing loss, no usable hearing. Elias flew in specialists, imported devices, signed papers, built rooms that hummed with machines. When nothing changed, he lowered his voice and his life. He scheduled his grief into calendar slots and kept the world at low volume. He watched Armand through panes of glass the way astronomers watch stars, at a distance, full of longing, not daring to name what they saw. Everyone believed the reclusive tech magnate's son had been born completely unable to hear. For 12 years, no one questioned it. Not the specialists, not the night nurses, not even his father. The boy lived in a cliffside observatory turned home, wrapped in a silence other people had decided for him. But everything changed the day a cook named Amara took a job on the headland and started listening with more than her ears. The house that watched the sea. Elias Kareem built a fortune from satellites and data. Then the plane carrying his wife went down over the Atlantic the week their son was born. He bought an old observatory on a wind-carved point and turned it into a home. Circular rooms, white corridors, glass that swallowed the sky. It looked like a crown laid on the ocean. It felt like a ward. His son, Armin, grew up there, barefoot and thin, with sea salt in his hair and quiet pressed into his bones. Doctors said he had profound bilateral sensorineural hearing loss. No usable hearing. Elias flew in specialists, imported devices, signed papers, built rooms that hummed with machines. When nothing changed, he lowered his voice in his life. He scheduled his grief into calendar slots and kept the world at low volume. He watched Armin through panes of glass the way astronomers watch stars. At a distance, full of longing, not daring to name what they saw. Over the next days, Amara learned the house's rhythms. The cleaners moved like tidewater. The night nurse watched monitors that watched a sleeping child. Elias moved between screens and silence, an orbit that never decayed. Amara watched the boy the way she'd watch sourdough. No poking, no rushing, no demands. Just presence and patience. The first oddity, when she banged her hip into a low drawer, soft, accidental sound. Armin's pencil paused mid-loop. When a pot lid clinked gently, his eyelashes fluttered. When the old observatory dome groaned and rotated half a degree in the night wind, he turned his head toward it like a sunflower. She told herself it was nothing. She told herself lots of things that week, including use less salt and you are here to cook. But truth does what steam does. If you hold it down, it finds a seam. Amara started noticing patterns. Armin's feet always found the sun-warm stripe of floor by the east window. His fingers drummed faster when kettles cycled toward a boil and slower as they cooled. When she opened the oven, he blinked the exact moment the internal fan spun down. No flinches to voices, but to the world's small hums and whirs. Yes, exactly yes. She didn't own a lab coat. She owned spoons and timing and nerve. On a Wednesday afternoon, she set 3 bowls on the counter. Glass, wood, metal. She tapped each with a chopstick once, waiting a full 10 seconds between them, gaze elsewhere. Wood thudded. Glass chimed. Metal sang like a tiny bell. Armin, across the room with his notebook, reshaped his scribble the instant metal rang. Not a flinch. A choice. A turning. The next day she boiled water while chopping herbs, counting under her breath. At 90 seconds, when bubble size changed from small to rolling, his head tilted, almost imperceptible. She said nothing. She wrote everything in the margin of a grocery list. Boil transition equals response. On Friday, she placed a metronome beneath a folded dish towel to muffle it and set it ticking. Armin's fingers synchronized with it in 20 seconds, then drifted, then resynced when she sped it up. She wanted to run into the study and shake Elias awake with this small miracle. But hope is fragile. It breaks if you wave it like a flag too soon. In a drawer with the wine opener and the rubber bands, Amara found a tuning fork. She didn't know why it was there, some forgotten hobby of a forgotten staffer, but the sight of it made her throat burn. Her brother used to tap his fork on the edge of his desk to settle the room before a chorus of small voices. That evening, the ocean breathed fog into the windows. Armin sat on the floor with his back against the cabinet, drawing spirals in the margin of a magazine. Amara washed her hands, dried them, and turned to him so he could see everything she was about to do. She tapped the tuning fork against the heel of her palm, a clean, thin tone, nothing loud, the kind of note you feel in your teeth if you're paying attention. She didn't hold it in the air. She pressed the base of it very gently to the wooden floor between them. Armin's hand stopped. His eyes moved, first to the fork, then to the place where wood touched wood, then to her. Amara lifted the fork, the sound sighing away, then tapped it again, pressing its base to different places. The floorboard, the cabinet door, the handle of the metal mixing bowl. Each time she watched him more closely than the fork. Each time his body told the story. Chest loosening, shoulders softening, a new helical focus in the pupils, like stars caught in a telescope. She was a cook. She was also suddenly a witness. She tried one more thing. She lifted one of Armin's hand, slowly with her eyes asking permission, and placed his palm on the wooden floor. Then she pressed the vibrating fork to the same plank a few inches away. He inhaled like the world had told him its first secret. He lifted his other hand and placed it there without waiting for her. Amara put the fork down. "Arman," she said, speaking not with volume, but with shape, so he could see her lips. "Can you feel it?" He didn't nod. He didn't shake his head. He did something braver. He picked up the tuning fork himself. He tapped it too hard. The sound skittered bright. He flinched, surprised, then laughed. The sound he made was a dry leaf loosening from a branch. It was also the most beautiful thing Amara had ever heard. The next day, the house manager found Amara in the pantry, breathless. "Mr. Kareem wants to see you," she said, which in that house could mean anything between "dinner is moved" and "pack your things." Elias stood at the threshold of the kitchen, hands in his pockets, face unreadable. Armin was beside him, notebook hugged to his chest. "I heard from the nurse that you were doing something with a fork," Elias said in a voice that tried for neutrality and landed on fear. "I was cooking," Amara said, and then she didn't lie. "I was also noticing." Elias's mouth compressed, a man sealing himself. "We do not," he began. "It hums," Armin said. The room stopped. Elias, the air, the ocean. Armin's voice was thin and rusted from disuse. He didn't look at either of them when he used it. He looked at the metal bowl. "It hums," he said again, his fingers tapping a rhythm that matched nothing and everything. Elias stepped forward like a man crossing ice. "Armin," he said, barely breathing the name. Armin pressed his palm to the cabinet door and whispered, "Stars." He wasn't looking at the sky. He was looking at the wood. Amara understood first because grief had taught her fluency in metaphors born of need. The vibration under his hand felt like the night. Invisible, everywhere. True. His word for vibration was stars. "Who told you you couldn't hear?" Amara asked softly. Armin blinked. The question hung like a ladder dropped down a well. Suspicion is an ethical ache. It hurts to carry. It hurts more to set down and pretend you never felt it. Days trembled into each other, busy with small miracles. Amara placed a speaker on the counter and played a metronome at different frequencies, barely audible to typical ears. Armin's hands found them like dowsing rods. She tried bone conduction through a wooden spoon handle pressed to teeth. He startled, then grinned, then tapped rhythms back. Meanwhile, Elias watched from thresholds, unable to enter, unable to leave. He wore the look of a man who didn't know whether to throw a party or burn his house down. One afternoon, while searching for baking powder, Amara found a locked metal box behind sacks of flour. She had no right to open it. She opened it anyway because sometimes right and wrong do not live on the same street as good and harm. Inside lay rows of small amber bottles, eyedropper style but labeled for ears, not eyes. The labels were printed, not pharmacy standard. The compound had a name Amara didn't know, and beneath it a dosage schedule scribbled with dates that ran like prison bars across the months and years. She took a photo. Then she put everything back exactly as if nothing had happened, except she couldn't put back her pulse. That night when the house went to its separate rooms, she called someone she hadn't called since she left the city. Layla, an old co-worker who'd gone back to school for audiology. Layla did not ask for niceties. She asked for the name of the compound. There was silence, then a soft swear. "That's an off-label mixture," Layla said. "It's been used in experimental protocols to suppress hyperacusis and misophonia, but it's not approved in kids, and chronic use can dampen outer hair cell function. Think of it as turning down the gain on the cochlea. It can make measured responses look absent even if pathways exist." "Could it," Amara swallowed, "could it convince everyone a child can't hear when he can?" "Easily if the child relies on bone conduction and low-frequency vibration, and you keep pharmacologically numbing the system." "Who prescribed this?" A name on the bottle caught in Amara's mouth like a fishbone. "Dr. Clive Hauer," she said. Layla exhaled through her teeth. "I've read depositions with that name." "Be careful." The confrontation wasn't dramatic, it was a doorway. Elias in its frame, Amara inside the kitchen, the sea chewing rock with the patience of centuries. "You looked through a private box," he said. "I did," she answered, "because I found your son's hearing in his hands and in your floorboards and your bowls, and I needed to know what else was in this house that denied him." "That compound saved him from suffering," Elias said, voice steady the way cliffs are steady. "It saved you from uncertainty," Amara replied, gentle as a blade. "That's not the same." He took the blow without stepping back. "Our first months were—" He stopped, pressing fingertips to his eyelids. When he continued, the words were not a defense, they were a confession. He screamed, not colic screamed, pain. The only thing that calmed him was the engine rumble on the drive back from the hospital. Hauer said there was a hypersensitivity, that we had to protect him from the world while his brain built tolerance. "And then you kept protecting him until the protection became a prison," Amara said. "Not unkind, just true." "What if you're wrong?" Elias asked, and that, more than anger, was the voice of a father. Amara put the tuning fork on the counter between them. "Then I'll be the cook you fire. If I'm right, he has a way of hearing the world that doesn't fit your paperwork. Turn the world up slowly. Let him learn its shapes." Elias looked at the fork like it was a key he didn't know where to fit. He looked toward the room where Armin slept. He looked at the ocean, which did not care about men's dilemmas. "No more drops," he said at last, like someone removing a mask after a parade that lasted too many years. "In for fringe cases, hyperacusis, auditory neuropathy, rare patterns you could turn into papers." He had prescribed the compound that dimmed Armin's inner world, and its proof. When Elias's lawyers reached out quietly, they found not a fortress, but a man who had slipped sideways out of prestigious institutions into private consultancies with NDAs. There were blog comments, half-deleted posts by parents who sounded similar, a few civil cases settled in rooms without windows. Elias didn't call the press. He called a different kind of person, a pediatric audiologist at the university clinic who'd written boring, cautious papers that saved lives without headlines. Dr. Uma Sharma didn't promise miracles. She promised testing that respected brains. She came to the observatory with a small team, not an entourage. She asked Armand's permission before placing a single electrode. She ran tests not only for air conduction hearing, but bone conduction pathways, tactile auditory integration, low-frequency thresholds most clinics ignore because they ruin neat graphs. Her report did not make anyone famous. It made Elias cry.